On today's episode of Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, my film review is Chevalier, and it all starts right now. This is Jordan Ramirez, and you are listening to Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. And now, here is my latest film review. My film review for this episode is Chevalier, released in 2023, directed by Stephen Williams, starring Kelvin Harrison Jr., Samara Weaving, Lucy Boynton, Ronke Adekoloejo, Martin Chokas, Alex Fitzallen, and Minnie Driver. Here is the synopsis of the film. It is the story about Joseph Boulogne, played by Kelvin Harrison Jr. He is the son of a French plantation owner named George Boulogne, played by Jim High, and a slave from Senegal named Nanon, played by Ronke Adekoloejo. As he was taken away from his mother as a child, his father ended up taking Joseph to a proper academic school in Paris, while telling young Joseph that he has to become the best in France and to never give up. As Joseph has become acquainted at school, he slowly starts to rise to the top as a member of French society. He is a talented fencer, violinist, and composer. He has performed for the royals of France, including a friendship with Marie Antoinette, played by Lucy Boynton, the Queen of France. One day, as Joseph Boulogne is having a conversation with another composer from Germany, Marie Antoinette proposes a contest to see who will become the head of the opera house in France. The contest is to come up with the best opera that will impress the royals and the jurors of the opera house. As Joseph is in preparation of his latest opera, his lead for the opera is Marie Josephine, played by Samara Weaving, wife of the Marquis de Montalembert, played by Martin Chokas. During the rehearsals of the opera, Joseph ends up having an affair with Marie Josephine that will ultimately have consequences. What do I think of this film? It is one of the best character dramas of this year that I have seen. Originally, I wanted to see this film at the Gasparilla International Film Festival, but I didn't have time to see it since I was a juror for the film festival watching the other short films at home, which I mentioned in my previous episodes. And I was also at work around the time that the film was being shown. I saw this film during the last weekend with my friend, and it was an empty theater with the exception of another patron who was also in the theater. Kelvin Harrison Jr.'s performance as Joseph Boulogne is one of the best that I have seen for this year. He displays a wide range of emotions, and his talent of playing the violin and fencing as well as his acting feels so believable, but also that he is able to bring the real-life composer from history with an amount of brevity and intelligence. One of my favorite scenes in which he displays his talented violin skills is in the opening of the film, when Mozart is asking someone from the audience. Joseph Boulogne answers Mozart's request and names the concerto to play on the stage. After Mozart accepts Joseph's concerto, he then asks Mozart if he would perform with him to see which violinist is the best from the audience. After Mozart performs with his violin on stage, Joseph then performs with his violin, and it becomes a musical duel between two icons like a frontier showdown. And the scene ends with Joseph as the main victor of the battle and Mozart saying, "Who the fuck is that?" It is an amazing sequence to watch in the film, as well as the fencing duel that occurs later in the film. Samara Weaving's performance as Marie Josephine is also great to watch as well. Her character in the film is married to the Marquis de Montalembert, played by Martin Chokas, who is very disapproving of allowing his wife to be in the arts. But her character, as it is explored throughout the film, is someone who desires to make her own choices without having to go straight to her husband, since she was married to her husband and is a talented singer, but also that she has to remember her role in the upper class of French aristocracy. Weaving's portrayal of this character is amazing to watch as she becomes romantically involved with Boulogne, but she also knows that this relationship would come with a high cost that could be disastrous to her marriage. Lucy Boynton as Marie Antoinette plays the historical figure as someone who is not only trying to present herself as a friend for Joseph Boulogne, but also as someone who is seen trying to handle diplomatic matters in her power as the monarch of France. Lucy Boynton was asked in an interview about her portrayal of Marie Antoinette as she played the historical figure in the film. I think it was kind of knowing that we've seen so many different iterations of her and knowing that I was free from having to do that, from having to convey every side of her, which I think is a responsibility or pressure you feel when you're playing someone real, that you want to fully represent them. And the tone of the script was so specific and clear, and this character's purpose in the film is very clear from an audience perspective or from an actor's perspective, the vehicle that she is to drive this message. So, it enabled me to be very specific with what I used, and I tried to read really broadly and read as much as I could about her and let all that filter in and let that inform my understanding of why she behaved the way that she did. But mostly it was being directed by the tone of the script. Lucy also mentioned in the interview about the character's relationship with Joseph Bologna. I think that relationship in the film is so interesting to analyze because initially it does just seem so earnest in their kind of being drawn to each other. I think, as everyone is with someone of such extreme talent, she was really drawn to him and he was so skilled, so magnetic that she really wanted to be around him. There's then also the element that is more superficial and transactional, which is that she wanted to be seen with him and she wanted him to be seen in her circle because it served her. So I think it was interesting letting that inform the later scenes where it is this genuine respect for him and genuine appreciation of him. But when it begins in that kind of self-serving way, I think that does make sense of the rest of their relationship or explains why she's been cold with him later. One of the reasons why I wanted to go see this film was because it was the story of someone who was not only erased from history, but also that it was a story about a person of color who was multi-talented in his own time, but also how to make the story feel relatable and contemporary while speaking to its audience. It was a film that I wanted to see that was complex and also to be seen from a racial perspective of belonging and acceptance while simultaneously facing barriers that are still relevant today. This film just came out almost a year after Tar from 2022, which dealt with a fictitious conductor who was complex and whose story is uncompromising to its critics. Screenwriter Stefani Robinson was best known for being the screenwriter for the FXX series Atlanta, as well as the series What We Do in the Shadows, but this is her first foray into feature films. In an interview with Essence magazine, she explained why she chose to make Joseph Bologna the subject of her first feature film screenplay. Everything about his life was the thing that made me want to make this a movie. When I was in high school, my mom had given me a book that mentioned him, and it was sort of like a highlight reel of everything that he had done. But that in of itself was like, oh my gosh, this guy's life is a movie. He was a master fencer, he was obviously a master violinist and composer, and he was Marie Antoinette's tutor, he had lived at Versailles, he was a master horseback rider, and he knew all these languages, and he went on to become a soldier in the French Revolution and traveled to England and to Haiti to help with the slave rebellion there. It felt like 4 movies rolled up into one, and I just couldn't believe that this was one person's life. Throughout my life, that seemed to be the case. No matter what bubble or what group that I was in, no one knew who Bologna was. When I had the opportunity to pitch the movie, obviously he had never left my mind. I was extremely enthusiastic, and Searchlight bought the pitch. Somewhat surprising because no one there had heard about him either. After Robinson's script was bought by Searchlight Pictures, Stephen Williams, the director of HBO's Watchmen, read the script, since he too also came from television, making the leap to feature films. I had never heard of Chevalier before. It was unbelievable to me that I had never heard of this person. Such an amazing, accomplished person, a virtuosic violinist, a composer of concertos and opera, a champion equestrian, a champion fencer, a champion marksman, someone of the American president John Adams referred to as the greatest, the most accomplished European of his day. I knew I needed to learn more. I started doing a deep dive into what little information exists about him. I was just floored by how innately operatic, innately cinematic his life story was. As soon as Stephen Williams was on board to direct, Stefani Robinson needed to make sure to flesh out the story to make it filmable. There is a lot of information on Joseph out there, and every day I think more comes to light. I had a great foundation to build on through these historical documents, albeit mostly from other people's perspectives of him. It was either someone writing a letter about him, or someone writing a journal and they mentioned him, or it was reviews of one of his operas. It took work piecing together Bologna's legacy. There was nothing there that felt like it came from him. There were no letters, no diary entries, and a third of his music has been lost to history. It was a lot of work to fill in those blanks, to really get inside his brain and how he must have been feeling, how he must have been reacting to the things that were happening to him. It took a lot of inferring, just trying to fill in the psychic blanks. In March of 2021, Kelvin Harrison Jr. was in final talks to play the lead role as Joseph Bologne. He got the role during the filming of Elvis in Australia. In July of 2021, Samara Weaving later joined the cast of the film. The following month, Lucy Boynton joined the cast as Marie Antoinette. The same month, Minnie Driver joined the cast as La Guimaude, who was Marie Antoinette's favorite dancer and would later play a key role in Joseph Bologne's celebrity stardom. And also during the same month, Alex Fitzallen later joined the cast playing Joseph Bologne's close friend Philippe. Production on the film started on September 7, 2021 on location at Prague, Czech Republic, to double the location of France in the 18th century. Filming wrapped up in November of 2021. Kelvin Harrison Jr., while he was preparing for the role as Joseph Bologne, said in an interview, "It was a lot of work. It started with really knowing who he was, finding as much information as possible, and realizing that so much of his legacy had been erased. Then once you get those pieces, it's about finding the tools that allow you to create the landscape around Joseph, like where was he? What did the time look like? Who was in power? What was the currency? What were some of the issues politically going on?" Because then all of that adds perspective, especially when you're dealing with a man who was such a political disturbance at the time. And then there's the technical aspect of playing one of the best violinists of all time, and fencers arguably. I did violin training for 5 months, 7 days a week, 6 hours a day. With fencing, I did a few months of training, mostly when production on the movie started. It was a lot of homework. I felt like I was doing a Marvel movie. For Samara Weaving, who plays the role of Marie Josephine, a real-life opera singer, when preparing for her role, she found the research aspect of her character to be challenging and how she incorporated into the character and later had to have preparations for singing for her character. It was hard to research. There wasn't a lot on her. There was a lot on her husband, really. I utilized Stephanie Robinson, the writer, because she had done a lot of research and knew things that I couldn't really find. So she was really my resource. And we talked a lot about the living situation she'd be in and what she did, and really how action shaped the character. I had a fabulous singing teacher, Michael Robbins, and we worked together for a few months before filming, and he was wonderful and patient and very kind. As the film was already cast, Williams and Stefani also pointed out that during the pre- and post-production process of the film, they both wanted to honor the legacy of Joseph Bologne with the women that played a vital role in the narrative. Stefani Robinson discussed this in an interview. "As a woman and with my own experience in this world, I wanted to push up against that they were just there to support Joseph, thinking specifically of Marie Josephine and Marie Antoinette. Both can equally be seen as disappointing or repulsive at times. At the same time, I have a lot of compassion for those women. Marie Josephine is someone who recognizes that she doesn't have any autonomy. She's stuck in this marriage she can't escape from, and recognizes Joseph's plight as well, but ultimately makes the choice to hide within the confines of her marriage, at least for the time being, and that to me is its own little mini tragedy." During the filming of the project, Robinson also said that she can identify with Joseph Bologne's struggles to be perfect. He was a true, undeniable workaholic who tried to excel at everything, wanted to lead the Paris Opera, a position that he thought belonged to him. The divas of the opera wrote a petition and he didn't get a job. He was black. They would never submit to a black person. It was unheard of. I remember feeling those feelings. I knew a lot of extraordinary talented black people. You go over and above to excel as a means to protect yourself. You have to be twice as good and work twice as hard to own what's yours. The true reality is it doesn't matter how good you are. I bought into that idea. Work hard, make good grades, write my ass off, lean in, make myself perfect. Somehow I'll be untouchable. It's a faulty armor, an illusion. In that moment, it doesn't matter how good you are. You aren't going to get the Paris Opera. The film had its world premiere at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival on September 11th, 2022. The film already premiered last week, and I got a chance to see the film in a theater that I have mentioned earlier. When asked about how audiences would react to this film to learn about Joseph Bologne's story for the first time, Stefani Robinson responded, "I want people to endeavor to be curious and open. That's the thing for me. This story doesn't end with Joseph. There are so many people who have been marginalized or erased because of race, sexuality, gender, religion, nationality, and what have you. and he's one of the many human beings who have contributed incredible things to this world we just didn't know about yet. I can't wait for all those other people to be excavated and celebrated. I hope that people become investigators of their own history and do not take everything at face value. Stephen Williams later responded after he was asked the same question in the same interview. Very awkward movies like this, we can make them end up sounding and feeling medicinal, and I definitely didn't want to make a movie that was medicine. This movie, it's entertaining, but you're also going to learn something about someone you probably didn't know about. And it is nestled into a time period that has something to say about our current moment. What I can say about this film is that it is not only a wonderful and influential character drama, but it is a film that speaks to our time, as the film has a revolution that talks about a new France that is multiracial, multi-generational, and also a film that is focusing on the future of a nation that shouldn't focus on the past, but should focus on its future. That speaks volumes. It is a film which I admire the great performances by Kelvin Harrison Jr. as Joseph Bologna, Samara Weaving as Marie Josephine, and Lucy Boynton as Marie Antoinette. The inspiring script and story by Stefani Robertson, and the direction by Stephen Williams, as well as the music by Chris Bowers and the cinematography by Jess Hall to give it a contemporary feel while also respecting the period of the film overall. You can go see the film right now in theaters, and I hope that you have learned something from this man's life story, and that there will be many more like this film in the near future. I also want to wish Stephen Williams, Stefani Robertson, and the cast and crew much happiness on future projects that you should be on the lookout for. On the next episode of Film Talk with Jordi Ramirez, it's a Jordi Ramirez minisode. Jordi Ramirez Recommends Camera Person from 2016, an experimental documentary feature directed by Kirsten Johnson, airing this Monday at 12 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. You have been listening to Film Talk with Jordi Ramirez. This series is now available to listen to at 4 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public every Friday. And my minisodes, Jordi Ramirez Recommends, every Monday at 12 p.m. on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. And just as a reminder to make sure to like and subscribe to my podcast on Spotify. Make sure to go to my blog website at filmtalkwithjordiramirizpodcast.wordpress.com with my latest podcast episode on the page labeled Episodes. You can contact me on my social media feeds such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I am also available on Letterboxd. Check out my YouTube channel as well, Film Talk with Jordi Ramirez, and please make sure to like and subscribe so that we can get up to 1 million listeners. If there is a film that you recommend that I would put for my next review, make sure to submit it to my social media accounts. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.